Hello and welcome to another one of our Photoshop tutorials. Today we're going to be going over how to create this unique dispersion effect. Let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is create a new document 1680 by 1475 pixels. We're going to be working with two images here. We have our watermelon and we also have this splash effect. These are the two files that we'll use to create the dispersion effect. There will be a link in the description to download these images. Next, I'll select my watermelon layer, make it visible. I want to rotate this layer and also scale it down a bit. To do this, I'm going to go into Edit, Transform, and rotate 180 degrees. Then I'll press Ctrl T to bring up my Transform tool. While holding Shift and Alt, I'll click and drag towards the center to scale it down. And that looks good right about there. We can always readjust it later. The next thing I'll do is bring up my splash layer, and I want to get rid of the white background that's behind this image, as you can see here. So to do this, I'm going to select my magic wand tool, make sure I have a tolerance of about 22, and I'm on new selection here. I'll click anywhere on the white background to create a selection. Ooh, excuse me. I have to make sure that I'm on the splash layer. So make sure you're on the splash layer or the water layer and click on the white background. There you go. You have a selection. Press backspace to delete. Control D to get rid of your selection. And as you can see here, now we have our water cut out from the white background. We're going to have to scale this water down a bit to fit the size of the watermelon. So what I'll do is I'll bring up my watermelon, make it visible again. I'm going to move this up a bit, my watermelon layer up a bit, and there we go. And I'm going to select my water layer, or the splash layer as I called it here, and I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees, edit, transform, rotate 180 degrees, and I'm going to move it down a bit here. There we go. I'm going to bring my splash layer above my watermelon layer, and we're just going to have to make some adjustments with the warp tool to give it that natural dispersion effect. Before we go into using the warp tool, I want to scale both of these layers down a bit more. So to do this, I'm going to hold Control and press on both layers. Control T to bring up my transform tool and scale it down just a bit more while holding Shift and Alt. There we go. I think that works out better because I want to stretch out my water layer a bit and using the warp tool, and I want to make sure we have enough room to get the effect. So I'll press Enter. Now that I'm on my splash layer, I'm going to start working with the warp tool. To get to your warp tool, you'll press Edit, Transform, and Warp. We're working with this portion right here, these corners right here, because we're going to eventually have to mask out the top part of the splash layer. So knowing that I'm looking around here to match up with the curve of the watermelon, we'll use our warp tool. So I'll bring this out a bit and drag that in a bit. Same on the other side, bring this out a bit and use the anchor point to drag it in a bit. Just so I line up with the curve of the watermelon, the shape of the watermelon. As you can see here, they align pretty well there. As you can see on this side, it doesn't align too well, so we're gonna have to make some more adjustments here. Bring this in a bit. You see our watermelon shows in the background there, so we'll get that there and just continue to make the adjustments so that it lines up. This portion here of the splash layer lines up with the curve of the watermelon, and make your adjustments until you feel comfortable with how it looks. So now that I have the top portion adjusted, we might have to come back in to the warp tool again, but for now I think that top portion is okay to work with until we make our mask. And I'm going to do the same on the bottom. Click out a bit, click on the corner and drag out a bit, click on the other corner and drag out a bit, and I think that looks pretty good. Press enter to confirm, and I think we're working pretty, I think this looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go into my mask tool at the bottom of the layers panel. I'm going to make sure I have black selected and select my brush tool. I'm going to scale down my brush, make sure I have 0 hardness. Yeah, my hardness is on 0, and I'm going to zoom in a bit so I can make sure I get a nice clean mask. Select my brush tool and start masking. Now I don't want to go into this portion of the splash layer, so I'm going to scale my brush tool down a bit more and start masking out. There we go. We might have to come back in and make some more adjustments here, but for now I think it's working out well. Control and minus to scale out, increase my brush size, and continue with the masking. I can see along this corner we have some of the water coming out of position. I think I clicked one too many times there. Okay, now we zoom in, and I think that looks okay, but I want to refine it a bit. So I'll scale down my brush tool, just kind of get rid of that portion there. Now that I'm zoomed in, I might as well check the rest of the image here. There we go, clean that up a bit. Take this out here, clean that up a bit, and just make sure it aligns perfectly with the shape of the watermelon. There we go. Control minus to zoom back out, and I think that's looking pretty good. We can make the rest of our adjustments in the using the warp tool. So the next thing we're going to do is add a few adjustment layers to match the color of the water to the watermelon. That'll create the nice dispersion effect, or help add to the nice dispersion effect. So to do this, I'm going to select my adjustment layer, go to hue and saturation, and I'm going to completely desaturate, take out all the color from the water. As you can see, our watermelon has changed color also. So I just want to work with the water layer, and to do this I'll just click this little clip icon right here at the bottom of the hue and saturation properties, and there you go. You've taken out the color from the water layer here. So now X out of that, and I'm going to add a color balance layer. And there we go. We're on midtones right now, so I'm going to add some green. The same thing, click this little icon to clip it to the water layer, so that we're only making the adjustments on the actual water layer and not the watermelon. As you can see, that brightened up quite a bit there. As a matter of fact, I might brighten up that watermelon layer a little later. So for now, we're just working with the water layer. So I'll clip that so that the watermelon maintains the same color there that we started with. I'm in midtones. I'll switch to highlights, add some more green, and there we go. Now it's starting to take effect. As you can see, it's somewhat of a yellow there on the watermelon also, so we'll add some more there, but we're in the highlights menu. So actually, let's bring that back to 0 and go into shadows, add some green, and now it's starting to take the effect. I think that looks pretty good. Let's see if we add yellow in the shadows here. Yeah, there we go. Add a little bit of yellow, and we should be good here. I want to make the watermelon a bit more vibrant, so we're going to add a color balance layer to the watermelon as well. We'll select our watermelon layer, and then go into the adjustments and select color balance. We're in our midtones. Let's just work with the sliders a bit until we get a nice effect. And there we go. I think that looks good there. We're gonna also kind of get rid of the shadow that the watermelon has here, but we'll work on that a bit later. I think that looks pretty good for now. We'll X out of that. And again, you want to clip it to the bottom layer here, so you just press this icon here and it just clips to the watermelon layer there. And now we have a bit of a color match here. That looks a bit more natural. So we'll X out of there. I want to add a bit more masking to our water layer, or our splash layer rather. So I'm going to select the mask on the splash layer, zoom in a bit, because I want to get rid of this darkness here on the top of the water layer. So zoom in, and with a larger brush, we're going to create some more of a light mask, just to blend it in a bit better here. So I have my brush set to 200, and I'm going to just continue to mask out a bit here. Just clicking here and there to create a more natural blend. I think that looks better there. There we go. Now when you zoom out, yeah, I think that's a much more natural effect there. Alright. So now that we have our layer blended in well here, the next thing we'll do is we'll add our background. I'm going to select my background layer, and I have a color selected here of D as in Delta 3 7 D as in Delta 9 Charlie. Okay, select OK so that your foreground is there selected, and press Alt backspace to fill your background. I'm going to zoom out a bit. We want to add some depth. So to add depth to an image, you need a foreground, midground, and background. So you have something to work with here. So I'm going to select my watermelon layer, duplicate it by pressing Ctrl J, place it behind my watermelon layer. The copy I'm going to place behind the original. There you go. Oh, we lost our clip here. So what we're going to do here is select our color balance layer. While pressing Alt, just hover between the layers, and you see that little icon pops up there. Just click once and it'll clip back. There you go. Now you got your color balance clipped back to the original watermelon layer. So if you ever lose a clip, that's a helpful hint. So we got our pink background here, and I want to select my copy that I made of the watermelon, and I'm going to increase the size. We're going to scale it up a bit. So I'm going to press Ctrl T, and I'm going to scale this up to something right about there, just so you have some pink here on the corners, and you also have some pink on the bottom corners here. You'll press enter, And now we're gonna add a blur. So we'll go into filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. And I think that looks good. I have the Gaussian set to 58.2. I'll click OK. And now we have a bit more depth here, but it's still missing something. So I want to add a drop shadow behind the watermelon here. But before we do that, I'm gonna take out this shadow that we have on the watermelon here. So to do this, I'm gonna select my dodge tool. I'm gonna zoom in a bit. My dodge tool selected. Excuse me, I'm on midtones with an exposure of 14. And we're just gonna click to get rid of this shadow that we have on our watermelon. Yeah, I think that looks better here. Let's see, we have this a bit lighter on this side, so I'm gonna switch to my burn tool and see if we can darken that up a bit. Yeah, that's a little better. Just go over the shadows here. Well, the darker parts rather. I shouldn't say the shadows. We're going over the darker parts of the watermelon. And this will help create contrast on the watermelon. There we go. I think that looks good. We're gonna zoom out, and now we can add our drop shadow to the watermelon here. So select my effects, drop shadow, and you know what, before we do that, let's zoom in so we get a better view of the drop shadow. There we go. What we're working with, we're on the watermelon layer, effects, drop shadow, and let's move this over to the side and work with our sliders here. I'm gonna bring this in the opposite direction, so -90 degrees, and let's see if we bring this out a bit. Yeah, that looks good about there. So I have my size, the slider for size is maxed out, so I have it at 250, my distance is at 42, and my spread is at 24. I'll click OK and zoom out a bit. Okay, now we're on to our last few steps. We're just going to do some minor editing just to make sure that we have the full effect of what we're looking for with this dispersion. So I want to increase the size of the water in the watermelon, and I want to lighten the background a bit so it's not so dark, and I also want to raise this drop shadow back up because I don't want to see this shadow behind here. I want it just above the watermelon. So we're going to select our watermelon, the background copy layer of the watermelon, and I want to lighten it up a bit. So let's go into our adjustment layer and brightness and contrast. Let's add some brightness to it so that it's not completely taken away from the foreground. We're going to add some levels as well. You can X out of that. We're going to press Alt to make sure that it clips solely to the background. Well, the watermelon copy background. That's clipped on there. Let's add some levels. No, that's exactly what we don't want. We're going to take the midtone and bring that up a bit there. There we go. Now we have what we're looking for there, and we're just going to increase the size of the watermelon in the water, and we should be done with this tutorial. Let's see what we got here. We got our water. Let's group all of these layers together. I selected my top layer all the way into the watermelon layer. While holding shift, I'll select my watermelon layer, Control G, and now we have the watermelon and the water effect in one group. So now we can press Control T to scale it. And that completes our tutorial. As a matter of fact, before we end the tutorial, I just noticed when I went to move this group that we have somewhat of a mask that we need to add here. So I'm pretty sure that that is on the splash layer. So I'm going to select my mask on the splash layer and then just mask out here. There we go. Now we got rid of that there. And readjust that, Control T, Shift and Alt, and I think that looks better there. Make sure that shadow is not following me around. There we go. Enter. And there you go. You've completed the dispersion effect. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to click on the subscribe button below. Also, if you can, please mash that like button. We would greatly appreciate it. If you have any tutorials in mind that you'd like us to upload, please leave us a comment below. Until next time.